Albert Breer's been all over this story. He's also traveling the country going to NFL training camps, which we'll get to. The NFL has 3 days to appeal. What do you think is happening right now and will happen by 9 a.m. on Thursday morning, Albert?
I think there are a lot of league officials that are probably on Twitter right now, like just sort of taking the temperature for like what the public reaction to all of this is. Because I don't think that is, I think that's a very relevant piece of the whole thing. So how's the public reacting? I think that's a piece of it. Of course, I think they're going through their own options here. And really, to me, there are 3 options. Number one, you can pin this on Sue Robinson if you're them. And you can say, we negotiated this process 2 years ago with the union. We respect the process. We don't agree with her view of the facts, but the process was a good one, and we'll stand by what she said. The second option would be you go to 8 or 10 or 12 games, and you say, now this is our decision to do this. We believe there's a little bit more there than Sue Robinson thought. And if they do that, then it becomes their decision. And then the question is that enough? Like, does the public look at an 8 or 10 or 12 game suspension as enough? And then maybe because Deshaun Watson wants closure, he accepts it. The third option is the nuclear option, which is you say, we're going to do what we want to do all along. We're going to give him a year. And then you wind up in court, I think. So, and if you wind up in court, that's the other part of this, Dan, that's really interesting is if you wind up in court, that could mean Deshaun Watson plays in the opener. Yeah. Because at that point, if he sues, then almost certainly the union would seek a temporary restraining order to stay the suspension. And I think he'd probably get it. And if a court stays the suspension, well, then Deshaun Watson's playing week 1 against the Carolina Panthers. So, I think the easy route out here for the league is to pin it on Sue Robinson, because the other 2 options are taking ownership of the decision. And I think with one option, is it enough? With the other option, it's you're going to war again.
What do you think happens?
For a while, I've thought that they were preparing to leave this alone. And I still believe that. Like, I think that they've set it up in a way, and I've said this to you, like they've set it up in a way where they can leave it alone because they already got word out there. And you and I talked about it, I think, a few weeks ago, where like the judge was clearly upset that so much of this became public, right? Well, why would the league, which is so PR savvy, risk angering a former district court judge?
Yeah.
Like, why would they do that? Well, they would do that because they felt like the thing may not be going their way. And if she makes a decision they don't like, then they would have the recourse to say, we tried. And so I think the easy route out now is to pin this on Robinson and say, this was her decision. This is a new process. We negotiated this with the union. The owners don't want us involved in every piece of this anymore. We're going to respect the process that we set up 2 years ago with the union. To me, that's like the cleanest exit. And I don't think it's a value judgment on what happened with Watson. I think it's just sort of protecting themselves going forward. The other 2, I think would be more of a moral play.
Yeah.
And I think the question is, like, do they have the appetite to spend a year in court with another star player and make so many facets of the NFL season about Deshaun Watson? Because I think you and I both know, you remember the year Brady was in court the whole year, like that would not go away. Like he'd probably be playing week 1. He'd probably play the whole season because the court process takes a while, and it would be a talking point throughout the NFL season.
In a month from now, nobody's going to remember this judge's name. This is going to be on Roger Goodell. Mm-hmm. Whatever happens, he either did or he didn't, try to, drop the hammer on Deshaun Watson. Yeah. And trying to, they are PR savvy, but I wonder if you go, hey, we tried, but we have to respect the process here. Now we have to move to change what, the penalties are, because all she did, if you read the 15 pages, which I know you did, she just used the history, recent history of punishments here. You bring up Zeke Elliott or you bring up Ben Roethlisberger. She said, yeah, the NFL made your case. You made your case, but, this is what I'm going to give. She can't change the policy, the punishments that you've given, I don't think. Right. That's what I was surprised that the NFL thought she's going to do something on her own, which That's not part of her job, I don't think. It was just,
No.
hey, you asked me to look at this. I'm looking at this. This is what I'm recommending. That's it.
Judges operate on precedent,
Mm.
and judges, like, her charge in this whole thing is to make a decision that'll allow her to write a brief that is appeal proof. Like, the goal of any judge in a situation like this is to do something that's very fair and down the middle, and like takes into account everything that's put in front of them and nothing else, right? And then in the end, be able to put something on paper that is going to be very, very hard to challenge. And if you read the opinion, like if you go into it, it's really interesting, some of the things that are in there. Like, you can see her playing both sides of it, right? One of the most glaring things to me was she both found him responsible for sexual assault and also called it nonviolent. Like, to me, like, that was maybe the most interesting thing. And then she came up with her own definition of sexual assault, which is unwanted sexual contact. Well, is that by definition violent? So like,
Yeah.
there are a lot of things in there where it's like, you can see how she's sort of serving both sides. And this is just me reading it, Dan. It's really hard, if you look at it, to challenge her process. And that's the one thing everybody here has to remember, right? Is if the NFL appeals this and appeals it to Goodell or his designee, they can't change the facts. The facts are the facts now, right? Like, so you can't go and find 8 more women to talk to and change the facts of this case, or the facts of this case. And so, like, what you'd be doing is you'd be challenging the process that Sue Robinson went through. And if you read that brief, it's actually pretty hard to challenge the process she took to get to the decision that she made.
He's Albert Breer, senior NFL reporter. He's the Monday morning quarterback. Was there a deal in place for Deshaun Watson? At least offered a deal?
Yeah, there was no deal in place, but yeah, there were deals offered. So there were 2 sets of settlement talks, essentially, one before the hearing, another after the hearing. The first set of settlement talks went absolutely nowhere. The NFL was insistent on at least a year. And they said, if we don't get a year, we're going to seek an indefinite suspension in the hearing. Watson's camp wasn't going to go for a year. That was that. Like, there's just no getting past that. I think the interesting part of this that never got out, and I think this is fascinating, she actually told the parties in the hearing to expect a ruling the first week of August. So, like, as all of us were like, where's the ruling? Where's the ruling? Like, the people involved actually knew that it was coming when it came. And she delivered it when? On August 1st. So, like, the timing of it was exactly what she said it was going to be. The people who were involved think she gave them that month to try to settle it on their own, which is common with judges, right? Like, give the parties time to figure it out on their own. Mm. They did get back to the table. That was the second set of settlement talks. My understanding is the league offered a deal that would have been 12 games. So it would have brought him back for the last 5 games of the season, and a fine of close to $10 million, which is what he made last year. So if you think about that, that would actually allow the league then to say, well, last year, that was a suspension. So because he got docked all his pay from last year. And so that would have allowed the league, if you think about this from a PR standpoint, to say, we got pretty close to what MLB did to Trevor Bauer, because he's been off the field for a season and then 3/4 of another season. Mm-hmm. And he lost all of that money. So that was their offer. And my understanding is Watson's camp was willing to go to about 6 to 8 games, but not beyond that. And so that's sort of where the divide was at the very end before they let Robinson go ahead and make a ruling here.
Yeah, boy, that's rolling the dice. But it worked out because, training camps, you've been in Green Bay, thank Bills, Browns, Steelers, Bears, Colts. Let me start in Green Bay. How's morale with Aaron Rodgers this year?
It's so calm there. Like, I remember going there last year. I was there day one last year, and it was just everything was hitting the fan. You know what I mean? Like, and I actually sat down and talked with him for about 25 minutes yesterday, and he just seems very at peace with everything. Like, it's almost like, this is where I'm going to spend the rest of my career. And it feels like he has ownership of the offense. He has some level of ownership of the roster, he's in lockstep. Like I talked with Brian Gutekunst about how they fixed their relationship last year. He seems like he's in a really good place. And it was interesting because I asked him about what the last year was like. And, some of what we went through was the criticism he took, over obviously the vaccine issue. And he said, like, it sort of taught him to try to stop paying attention to everything on the outside. Like, I guess people like me and you, you know what I mean? Like, and just focus on the people who are around him, his allies, the people in the locker room. And it's just sort of simplified his life, which I thought, no matter what you think about what happened with him or whatever else, like I actually look at it and he was pretty, I think it put him in, it ultimately wound up putting him in a pretty decent place. Here's the other thing. With Devontae Adams gone, the other thing I talked to him about was how that team is now built sort of the way the Patriots used to build teams around Tom Brady, where they didn't overextend to put skill position players around him, but they're super well-rounded. Dan, that defense looks like it's going to be electric. I mean, they have 7 first-round picks starting on their defense. And I think one thing that's interesting about it is as Aaron gets a little bit older, now because they're really good defensively, they've got a really good running game. They're going to be able to ask less of him, so he doesn't need to be Superman every week. In fact, he told me, like, when I asked him about building the roster, he mentioned like the special teams players. He was like, I'm really excited about, I'm not even kidding. Like, he was like, I'm really excited about these guys we have on special teams. He's like, because the last couple of years that's cost us. It was really, really interesting. And it's a very different tone than I've heard from Aaron in the past.
You're in Minnesota. I'm fascinated what was going on with Mike Zimmer and Kirk Cousins, that you have a coach who I guess didn't like his quarterback. I don't know if the quarterback liked his head coach. And so what changed it? Well, you even had the GM of the Vikings saying, hey, we don't have Tom Brady. Like, what is Kirk Cousins, mentality going into this season?
Well, I mean, I think it's got to be like just like any quarterback his age, where to some degree you're like fighting to extend your career. I do think, like, to me, like what's happened in the NFL at quarterback's fascinating. I think you and I have talked about the Mahomesization of the NFL, right? Like how like good might not be good enough anymore. So the Rams trade out Jared Goff to get Matthew Stafford. The Niners try to level up by going Jimmy Garoppolo to Trey Lance. The Browns go from Baker Mayfield to Deshaun Watson. And to me, it's like, if you're going to look for that sort of opportunity, sometimes you have to be patient, right? And so I think what the Vikings and Raiders are doing is really interesting, because to me, it's sort of like what Alex Smith was in Kansas City, where Alex Smith was a really good quarterback who put you in a position to compete in the here and now, establish a program and build a roster and buy you time to wait for the right opportunity. So I think that's sort of what Minnesota is doing now with Kirk. And I'm excited to get to talk to him because he obviously has the relationship with Kevin O'Connell from Washington, and they're going to run the offense that, he came up in and that he played great in Washington. And so, the way I look at it, he's got a really good team around him. He's got a coach who likes him. He's got a system that he's thrived in the past. And I mean, yeah, of course, now because of his age, the juncture of his career he's at, like he's fighting for his career, because like for all that stuff I just said about like buying yourselves time, you don't know when the right opportunity is going to come along. It might be next year, and then he may have to find work somewhere else. So I think he's just at a really interesting juncture of his career. And like where I look at like Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr now is sort of in the same spot Alex Smith once was with the Chiefs.
Did you see the sideline video when they won a game, last second field goal?
Mm-hmm.
And Kirk Cousins pushes Mike Zimmer. Mike Zimmer pushes him back.
And it looked like...
And then it looked like Mike Zimmer wanted to go after him.
Yeah.
And then you find out that Mike Zimmer...
It didn't look like fun and games.
No. It's like one of those, like, hey, we won, boom. And then he pushes his quarterback. And then I thought, oh, my God. Like Zimmer it looked like he wanted to fight Kirk Cousins after a win.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That thing went sideways, and I don't know. I'm not sure. Zimmer always had his issues with with quarterbacks. Like Zimmer, and I love Zim. Like he has a little Buddy Ryan to him. You know what I mean? Like he always had a little Buddy Ryan like resenting the offense to him. And if you talk to the offensive coaches, they would tell you like how they were restricted in certain ways because there was a certain formula he wanted to play with and that would highlight his defense, and Buddy Ryan was always that way. Rex Ryan coached that way to some degree. So I think Zimmer always had that sort of old school, like a little natural resentment of the offense and the quarterback if it were to get in any way of his defense performing at the level that he thought it could.
I know you went to see.
It's good that I bring up Buddy Ryan because Buddy Ryan actually punched an important offensive person on the side.
Kevin Gilbride.
Kevin Gilbride. Yeah.
Before I let you go,
Can you imagine if that happened? Can you imagine if that happened now?
And then Sue Robinson would have to hear the case, and then
we would be getting a 15-page report on it.
Quickly, the Buffalo Bills. You went to see them. If there's one issue? Everybody loves Buffalo. You got any issues with Buffalo?
Punter. I'm not even kidding. Like when I asked them, I was like, I looked at the raw. I mean, it was my first stop, like that team looks like it's loaded. I mean, honestly, even like you think about like the running back situation, right? So Singletary and Moss, right? Like they think James Cook could be like a poor man's version of his brother. So now you're putting him in the backfield with a couple of other good players. Like Gabe Davis is up to almost 230 pounds of good weight. Like looks like he could be a monster. Kaiir Elam, like looks like he just, not that he's making plays left and right, but just sort of blended in with the first defense. So there's reason for real optimism in Buffalo. I mean, if Josh Allen can pick up where he left off, and they really think like from a leadership standpoint, he hit a turning point at like halftime of the Tampa game. They wind up losing that game, but they came back from way behind. If Josh Allen picks up where he left off, I mean, I don't think I'm speaking out of school to say that could be like a 14-15 win team.
And you go back and look at Josh Allen's rookie stats, they're worse than Zach Wilson.
Go back and look at, honestly, Dan, go back and look at what everybody was saying after that first year about Darnold, about Mayfield, and about Allen. Yeah. I mean, like, I think there were people who liked Rosen more than Allen back then after his rookie year. Yeah. So it's like huge credit to Josh Allen for somehow, because we don't see that. Like normally, like after a year, we're not that far off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you read some of the stuff after 18, the stuff people were saying about Josh Allen, I mean, like, I don't know, the cold takes exposed guy probably have a field day with it.
Safe travels. Always great to talk to you. Thank you for your insights.
Thanks, Dan.
That's Albert Breer, the Monday Morning Quarterback.